What people become Prime Minister of St. Lucia have been the most readied of all of them.
So again, you were ready now, then you were
Readied.
ready then,
Yes.
Dr. Anthony, even then.
Even then,
And,
readied.
And then
And Alan Chastanet,
then
and Von
then
Lewis,
Dr. Von
and
Lewis.
John Compton, and George Charlton of them have been the most readied.
Because of what? Your years in politics?
Because my experience, my ministerial experience, based on ministerial experience, I've been the most ready.
I, Philip Joseph here,
I would like to be judged as being the Prime Minister, not being judged as being part of a government.
Came into government that we had a manifesto and a vision and mission that had been approved by my party, by the highest body.
Basel 11 has not been in existence. 50 was
Giant getting bazooka. You spraying big on to knock out mosquitoes.
I have never had a joint account with anybody in my life. Not my ex-wife, not my children, nobody. And I will refer that to the Privileges Committee.
What about the culture of people getting into office and not being effective in taking
What people become Prime Minister of St. Lucia have been the most ready.
Let's do it this Wednesday, because if it's Wednesday, it's NewsMaker Live.
Good evening, welcome to another edition of NewsMaker Live right here on DBS Television. My name is Timothy Poleon. We go up until 10 o'clock this evening, at which time we conclude with the clip that peaked. We'll be discussing a range of issues as always on this broadcast, and later we will be taking your calls. We have yet another interesting guest, no stranger to NewsMaker Live, former St. Lucia Prime Minister. He is currently the leader of the parliamentary opposition and the MP for Miku South, Mr. Alan Chastanet. Welcome to the program, sir.
Great to be with you always, Tim.
Yeah. As always, we have a lot to discuss on our broadcast this evening, but in particular, the big revelation yesterday, and that is that the St. Lucia Tourism Authority has entered into a marketing arrangement with the British football club, Arsenal. Mm-hmm. What do you make of this?
Well, look, I mean, I'm a marketer, been Minister of Tourism, and what we call it co-branding, finding out, working with different international brands to help promote our own brand is a great idea. So Arsenal is a globally recognized brand. So in principle, I have zero difficulties with it. Mm-hmm. But do
you think it's going to work for St. Lucia?
Well, that's what I was going to say to you. The but is, we don't have enough information.
Okay.
Right? We don't know enough of the details of what it is. I'm only now understanding, I don't know if you understood that, it's a 5-year deal?
Yes, I heard that.
So if you go online and you find out about destination marketing with Arsenal, there was a previous arrangement that was in play, which was with Rwanda. And that was for, I think, was 6 or 7 years or 8 years. And the Rwanda deal included the co-branding and all the joint marketing, included the players and the coaches coming over to Rwanda to do promotions and also to provide training. So the similar kind of package that we've understood. I don't know if there's anything different. So the deal with Rwanda was for £10 million a year. So for the number of years was close to £80 million that was spent. That means £10 million is close to 35 million EC dollars a year. So to determine whether in fact that makes sense, if that's good value, because let's put $35 million EC in perspective, that's more money than the destination has been spending on marketing in the entire world. That's tied up in one particular deal, if that's the amount. What are the outcomes that the state is expecting? I don't know. We've not been provided with that information. And I think that that's very, very important information for us, the public, to see whether in fact that that's the best way to spend your taxpayers' money.
But why should this be tolerable? Why should this be permissible? Why should this be acceptable? And why should this be the norm? And again, you might say, well, my question is misdirected, and my blame probably is misdirected as well. But doesn't it reflect badly on the opposition that this is happening under your watch in particular as the sole opposition MP? What do you think would cause them to have the confidence to do that in the first place? Not to disclose the arrangement, the contents pertaining to that particular agreement, especially the cost, because I'm sure there must be some kind of give and take. In our case, what do we have to give?
So I want to get this. I want to get this right. So the reason why the government has been silent, GPH, NLA, halls of justice, St. Jude's Hospital, contracts to contractors to be doing roads and stuff like that, CIP monies, and the secrecy that we see that pattern of behavior follow is because of a weak opposition?
No, I'm just asking what would give them the confidence to do that? Is it because, I'm just asking, not saying, is it because of a perceived weak opposition?
I'm not so sure. I mean, when you look at it as an opposition, where we have attempted to do marches or where we've attempted to bring issues to the table, there are times where the government has reversed a decision or something. We've taken the government to court, right? And so everything that's within our means at the end of the day. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the people. Now, one can argue, and I've heard some reporters argue, that a United Workers' Party has not found a way to gain confidence with the population and therefore convince people that this is wrong, right? Maybe that's the case. George Odlum. Are we a George Odlum? Because I saw George Odlum convince people against things that in hindsight were wrong. But he was able to convince the population that they mattered at the time. I like to think that we've done everything that we can to bring those things to light. But to answer your question, I'm going to say this too. There is a certain level of arrogance within the Labour Party and also a certain level of confidence. And that confidence, I think, has come over a period of time where you see people trying to defend the indefensible. So let's just take, not to change the subject to what you brought up, Ireland and the visa. I mean, I even saw you laughing and being cynical at the time to say, "Wow, okay, so the excuse that the government is giving is people don't fly to Ireland." And then the Prime Minister went on further to say that this was a domestic issue in Ireland because they were having concerns about immigration. Now, does that make sense? I mean, Ireland is having issues with regards to immigration domestically, and the first country they choose to revoke the visas is St. Lucia. Now, think of those two statements.
And when St. Lucians don't really travel there.
And the St. Lucians don't really travel. Okay. Now, when a government can get away with those kinds of irresponsible, reckless statements on a consistent basis, there is a certain level of arrogance or confidence that a government has developed that they're untouchable. Untouchable. I mean, before we went on the air, you and I were having a quick discussion, and I was saying, can you imagine that a judge in one of my court cases came to the court and said that he's recusing himself from my cases because there was political interference? The one thing that is probably the greatest atrocity is to know that our courts are being influenced by politicians. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Because that should be sacred, the independence of it. After the judge did that, 1 month went by, and then we found out that the judge was transferred to Grenada. Has anyone asked any questions? Has civil society asked questions? Has the media asked questions? And every time that we, the opposition, try to bring these issues, the first thing that's being said, oh, well, they're just being political. They're just doing it to be politically mischievous. Really? Politically mischievous? I mean, there's some things that are so blatant as to what's taking place in this country. And the excuses that the government is offering for them are so weak, and yet they're allowed to continue because there is no pressure. There just seems to be some silence, or that maybe there's something that you and me are missing behind the scenes as to what is really motivating the population and who is being held accountable. So, did you know that they were doing the deal with Arsenal?
I mean, the St. Lucian public were not aware of this.
Nobody was aware of it.
Yeah.
Okay? And then all we heard was the deal was being signed and it's a done deal. And that's within their right. They won the elections. They're in government. They control the purse strings. They have the ability to go and contract and thing. And why would they not? Why would they give any information when episode after episode they've not had to provide the information and there's been no consequence to it? So leading up to the elections, did people know that St. Jude's was a problem? The government initially promised that to complete St. Jude's, the old building, we were wrong to move to the new building, because to complete the old building would have taken 6 months and $30 million. In fact, there's a famous saying in the House where he said it would take some chemical and some paint. Yes? How long has it been? 6 years? How much money have we spent so far? We know of $350 million. We don't know what the final number is. And we're not in the hospital. That's a blatant lie. No matter whether if the government moves in next month, okay, Tim, they have failed when it comes to St. Jude's. Completely. The government did the GPH deal. As pieces of information became available to us. So one of them was that they leased the property on the waterfront for $1 a year. Now for me, I understand that when government is going into PPPs, that's what we do, which is exactly what we did with DSH. But with DSH, it was a bad deal. But with GPH, the dollar is okay. And it was the hypocrisy of the action and then trying to hide it. And then I watched Hilaire when I produced the lease in the House. And I deliberately sat back. If you watch the video, you'll see me sitting back. And all I was missing was for me to hold some popcorn to see how he was going to answer the question. And I watched him weave and bob and everything else. And ultimately, what did he come and say? It was not for a lease, it was rent. The semantics of the whole thing. And we let him, we give them a buy. The election came and went. So in essence, notwithstanding the information that came out about GPH, that we've given away the head tax, they've increased the head tax to $10 to $12, they're collecting all of the money for 30, 40 years. We now can see for ourselves what the money is being used for. Do you believe that the broad walk they did, that could not be done by a St. Lucian? The vendors arcade that's going ahead in Castries, there was no company in St. Lucia that could have done that? That this was some kind of stretch for us? This is the same country that built Point Seraphin? That's how your money is being spent? We see a similar deal being done in St. Vincent, and we see the amount of information that was revealed in that press conference in comparison to what was being revealed here. People didn't care. People didn't care that St. Jude's was not open. They doing an opening ceremony, a ribbon cutting, right? Some people justified that in saying, well, the place was open. So I just want to say to you that I believe that we as an opposition definitely have a role to play. But until these things, that we understand the consequences of the actions that are being taken and are willing to stand up and hold the government accountable, at least on one thing, okay, Tim? One thing is to be honest. At least that. And that's why I've said repeatedly, when a government betrays the trust of its people on the things that you're seeing, the things that they're doing behind the scenes that you cannot see, we should be even more worried about.
What questions are you asking yourself, and the opposition is asking itself, with regard to, as you say, that the government is getting away with those issues in terms of not being sufficiently transparent with the people. And you making reference to civil society. The opposition is part of civil society. Do you think there's a case of people just not giving credence to anything that the opposition is saying and therefore allowing the government to have its way?
33,000 people voted for us. And sadly, for the first time in the history of St. Lucia, less than 49% of the people, or less than 50% of the people, voted. And you've heard different excuses. The number one excuse I've heard, is fear. Right? They felt insufficiently intimidated. That's what I'm being told. The government would have known how they were going to vote somehow. They were convinced that that was the case, and didn't vote. So
they did not vote on that basis.
Don't
you think it's a case of
in interviews that we have done? Yeah. Now, again, this is what people say.
To me, when talking about voter apathy, is the fact that people just don't have any confidence in the government, neither the opposition.
And does that make sense?
It can make sense, yes.
How does that make sense?
People are frustrated. People are saying, we just don't have any confidence in this government. We don't have any confidence in the opposition. It's a waste of time. We're just not interested. We are disinterested as far as that process is concerned.
I'm sufficiently satisfied that there's been enough open discussions about that there's no such thing as not voting in St. Lucia. Because when you don't vote, your vote goes to the party that wins. And if in fact the choice is only two parties, sometimes, I think the Pope put it right, what did he say? Sometimes we have to choose between the lesser of the two evils. Okay? So, am I to then interpret, well, they just said leave it to fate and what's going to happen?
But it's
so I don't think it's as simple as saying it's just voter apathy. Is there some voter apathy? There's always been voters apathy. Okay? But we saw from 70% participation to 60% participation to 55% to participate to 49%. In Barbados, you love Mia. You appreciate the talent that Mia is. 37% voter turnout. Is it that the majority of people have apathy and say, you know what?
And low voter turnout in the Bahamas in the last election as well.
Correct. So I don't think that you can make that correlation per se. And I'm not trying to fool myself or to make excuses. I'm not so sure that that's the only apathy is the only cause of what's taking place. There's something that's been taking place globally with democracy in general, right? And St. Lucia has not been an exception to that rule. I mean, I have to ask myself the question, because that's what you started off by asking me, is what is it that we think? And I'm glad you asked the question, one, me, Alan Chastanet, and two, as leader of the party, the United Workers' Party, in our discourse. So we are going through an internal evaluation of what's taken place in the elections. I'm hoping that the final report will be done in the next 3 or 4 weeks. But certainly in some of the feedback that I've been hearing, it wasn't the fact that people didn't understand our message. I mean, you were in the media. Did we speak about GPH? Did we speak about health care? Did we speak about contracts? Did we speak about crime in St. Lucia? We're going now on our 4th consecutive year of 70 plus murders. That's unprecedented. And what? Who has to tell anybody in the general public, well, what's the government doing? And we don't want to hold the government accountable? And what's the government done? It's never his responsibility. Now, let's face it. Some people have become master politicians, and the art of deflection. The Prime Minister has spread the responsibility of crime, but he holds the ultimate portfolio on crime. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
He is the Minister of National Security. Right? But he has a minister of, what's it called now? Of
You have crime prevention, conflict resolution.
and conflict resolution. What does that mean? The fact is, he's been holding that post now for 3+ years. We still don't know what it means. None of us. So everybody has failed in holding the government accountable. Everyone. I will accept my certain share of blame, but part of the blame I'm not going to hold is that we didn't make this information known to the general public. Whether we transmitted it in a way in which people understood it, whether people believe the credibility of my voice or the voice of anybody in my political party, we can sit here and we can have that debate.
But the only thing is a case of two sides presenting their arguments to the electorate, as is normally done in the run-up to a general election. And the opposition would blame the government for the crime problem in St. Lucia in this particular case, accuse the government of dereliction of duty, not doing what is required of it, etc. And then the government is saying we do all that is possible, but somehow there are other factors that are preventing us from bringing this under control, and those factors are beyond our capabilities, beyond our control, let's put it this way. And the people are in a position to weigh both arguments and then they rule on it, because the people always have the final say. And in their ruling, for them, the government is trying and it's beyond their control. And what the opposition is saying does not really make sense. Don't you think that's the issue?
I've been reading a book, Malcolm Gladwell. And it was strange because I'd never heard of the book before. It's called Talking with a Stranger, right? And it explains or analyzes this thing where we defer to a truth, and particularly when we're meeting a stranger, right? So we make these assumptions automatically, and then we want to believe what these are. And there are a couple of examples they use in the book. Let me use two examples. Bernie Murdoch.
Yeah.
Okay. There was a gentleman who was asked to examine Bernie Madoff's business in 2000.
The Ponzi scheme?
The Ponzi scheme. So this was in 2000. Bernie Madoff was caught in 2009, went to court in 2011. So in 2000, by one of his competitors, to say, what is Bernie doing? So we can emulate it. The guy did his analysis and in one afternoon concluded that it was a Ponzi scheme. Okay? Made his phone calls, did his follow-up and said, this is a Ponzi scheme. For the next 9 years, he continued to alert the authorities that this was a Ponzi scheme. SEC, all these different people, etc. Gave them all the facts. It never got through. Bernie's what got caught, not because of the reports that this guy was putting out. He got caught because a whistleblower in his own company, in fact, a family member, became a whistleblower. Right? The SEC had known about this guy and recruited him to help them put their case to put Bernie Madoff in jail. So the question is, why is it that notwithstanding all of the evidence that was produced that this was a Ponzi scheme, did people continue to invest with Bernie Madoff? And when you speak to certain people who were, involved, and that's what the book did, right? Well, the SEC was auditing him. So if it was clean, but was it really that they believed that truth, or was it that they were financially benefiting from what Bernie is, and they didn't want to believe the negative about Bernie? Must be a good guy. All right? The second example, which is a horrible example, was the story of the guy who was the sports therapist for the women's Olympic gymnastics team. I don't know if you know the story.
Yes, I know.
And for years, he was molesting the girls, all the time pretending that he was giving them therapy. And in fact, one of the mothers in the story, right, remembers that while he was attending his daughter, he was turned on. And you know what her first thought was? This poor man trying to help my daughter and having to contain himself. Whereas that was really a signal that something was wrong. Okay? The book struck me because there were multiple examples of persons who were spies that were not detected. They had a story of a Cuban who defected to the U.S. And he was a very senior person. And he did not defect because he was solicited. He just decided to defect. And he showed up cold turkey, unannounced, at an embassy. And when they were interviewing him to determine whether he was legitimate or not, he revealed to the Americans 16 names of people that the Americans thought were spies for them, and showed them that they were all double agents. So you can imagine how shocked the Americans were, and the Western world was, to find out that Castro had fooled them to that extent. Right? And the book really touched me, opened my eyes, and made me ask a lot of questions, because what is it that causes people to defer to a particular truth? And maybe there are different reasons. But the reality is that truth is not always what it is. It is what we believe it is going to be. It's what we believe we want it to be. And I feel that, notwithstanding the amount of facts and the evidence, you've seen my frustration. Where I've said, did you read the court case? The answer is, most journalists, no. All the facts in the court case. I mean, the Ernest Hilaire situation with the Range Rover. And we just had the case with the CCJ. I tell all my friends, anybody who's contemplating going to the CCJ should read that case. It is a calamity. It is embarrassing. Because the case was asking the CCJ to give us leave for the court case to proceed, to be heard. And the court is supposed to, in my opinion, to be acting in the interest of the people. Right? The 5 judges, 5, who ruled in the case and who said they're not giving permission for the case to proceed, on the evidence of what? Said that there was not sufficient evidence to show, one, that the claim was that the DPP was responsible for the case, and therefore the Controller of Customs did not have the authority to withdraw the case. Notwithstanding the affidavit by Chico, who was then the acting Controller of Customs. Chico said in his affidavit, I passed the court case on to the DPP. He provided a letter that when he was at Controller of Customs, writing to the DPP to say, I have transferred all of the evidence to you. You know what the CCJ said? Because it was not a response from the DPP, they can't accept that. Now, let's just think for a moment, okay? A government is in office. You make an allegation, Chico and I did, that the DPP was responsible for the case. What would have precluded the government in office to have talked to the DPP, to say to the DPP, can you give us a letter to show that you were not in charge of the case? Nothing was provided.
But in a matter that's before the CCJ, I don't think you yourself can make a determination as to how they ought to rule on it, as to whether they should give you leave or not. I mean, that is, you're opining on this particular issue, but you are not a disinterested party as far as this is concerned. You're in the middle of it, and if they ruled against you, did not give you permission to go ahead with the case, I mean, you have every right to be disappointed, but do you think that you're in a position to say that the CCJ, they did not act in the proper manner? You can't be objective.
I am not, and again, I get it. So yeah. I understand that anything I say would be seen through that lens. So let me just say that. But I'm going to say it nonetheless. Okay?
Plus, you had an attorney representing your interest.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. And my attorney is equally shocked. Okay? And let me say to you that, in that particular case, there's a smoking gun. Right? There is an irrefutable fact of the case. substantiated and supported by evidence. Ernest claims that he purchased the car, and he did. Whether that money was his money to begin with, I ain't going to get into that. I'm not making any allegation.
But
Let me just give me a second.
Yeah, but don't you think we've gone through this before ad nauseam?
No, we haven't.
Yeah.
And that's the point. And when you speak to people, and so when I get into the habit of saying, okay, let me ask questions. Okay? So do you know, how is it that the car, and are you satisfied? Because the case has been going on. You're a journalist. Are you satisfied that the car was registered in the name of the state?
I'm satisfied, yes.
Okay, and was that an administrative error, or was that a deliberate transfer to the state?
Well, I don't know.
So there's a letter.
Yeah.
There's a letter that was written from the FAOS. The FAOS is the Foreign Affairs Office for the UK. So anybody who's doing these kinds of transactions would go through like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here. It would be the equivalent, okay? And the letter says, thank you for your phone call today. And telling us that the High Commission made a mistake. And that the car, this is in writing, does not belong to Tafao Williams. But in fact, the car belongs to the state. And the letter goes on to say, in order to avoid any confusion, when you apply for the duty-free status, and it says owner's name, put St. Lucia High Commission, and when it says address, put the St. Lucia High Commission address. We also know that in addition to the application for the incentives being done in the name of the state, that the registration of the vehicle was in the name of the state. And we also know that the dealer invoice was changed, because originally it was Tafao Williams, it was then changed to the name of the state. So here's the question that nobody wants to be able, this is the million-dollar question. We satisfied that he paid for the car? Yes. But when he transferred the car into the name of the state, who gave him permission to do that? And after the car was transferred into the name of the state, who then gave permission from the state to allow the car to go back into his name? And why does it matter? It matters because when the car came into St. Lucia, because he was a returning ambassador, right? There's a cabinet conclusion that says all returning ambassadors qualify for a duty-free vehicle. But here's the caveat. The car must belong to the ambassador. So the ownership of the vehicle mattered. The CCJ said, it doesn't matter. We're satisfied that he was the benevolent owner. We're satisfied that Tafao Williams, the letter said that at all times he knew the car belonged to Ernest Hilaire. The court was not being asked to opine on those kinds of details, but the CCJ chose to go into those details. Those are the details that ought to come out and ought to have been brought to court, and the truth be told. If the DPP was not prepared to come out on his own to say whether in fact he was in charge of the case, notwithstanding the letter by Chico, and did not write any letter to say that he was not involved in the case, right? Then the only time that he would be obligated to testify would be when the court case happens. Now, I don't want to go and rehash the whole thing. I'm just using the example. How much more evidence? When we had...
but I'll give you that on this particular matter, that you are very persistent on it. But there's been, the court has basically given its say on that particular issue.
It hasn't, and that's the problem. You see, and again, because the CCJ opined, but I want all of us to understand, what did they opine on? The CCJ felt that there was not sufficient evidence to warrant allowing the case to go to trial. I think that that's a travesty, Tim. On something as important as this, right? They should have allowed it to go to court.
Well, that's your opinion.
In my opinion, and wait a second, and me calling Ernest a liar only has a certain amount of impact. Correct? Ernest calling me a liar has only a certain amount of impact. And we, the general public, look what an independent arbiter. we think and we have thought of the courts as being an independent arbiter. Correct?
But remember,
have we?
Yeah.
Okay, wait a second.
You did not appear before the court without legal representation.
I did.
You had legal representation.
I know,
so
but
isn't it fair for us to say, as members of the public, that the court ruled, and the court ruled as far as the evidence is concerned? Not even I'm talking about being fair, but as far as the evidence before the court, they took that into consideration, legal minds, and then they ruled on the matter. Because not everyone appearing before the court can play the role also
wait a second.
of arbiter.
So it means that you trust the decisions of the court.
No, I'm just saying.
I'm just asking a question.
I'm just saying on the basis of how this whole thing has played out, if you appear before the court, you also cannot make a determination as to the outcome of that case.
Absolutely.
You must be able to live with the fact that the court will rule. And in some instances, it will not be to your satisfaction, and you will live there disappointed.
I wish I could accept that explanation, okay? And you're right to some extent, but I must satisfy myself that it was fair. Now I want to ask you the question. I go to a court. I had 14 court cases. A judge goes to the court on one of my cases, comes to the court and says, I'm recusing myself from 4 of Mr. Chastanet's court cases because there was political interference. And the judge was then transferred. And when I wrote to the Chief Justice said that that's not her responsibility. Really? Then whose responsibility is? Who is responsible for the integrity of the court? Okay, wait a second. Joy.
Yeah, but before you go down, that particular case, I mean, we all should be concerned. We all should be asking questions on this particular issue.
Including me?
Yes, one way or the other, somebody needs to make a pronouncement on an issue of that nature.
Because we're dealing with the integrity of the court. Okay? So one of the cases that same judge had was this case. And it's my opinion, okay, I don't have any facts to substantiate, my opinion, that the judge gave a decision because he wanted it off his court.
On this case?
On the Hilaire case.
Okay.
Okay? It then went to the Court of Appeal, the Regional Court of Appeal, the OACS Court of Appeal, right? And the Court of Appeal, 3 judges said there was no evidence. And my lawyer came back and said, no evidence? Said, let's look at the facts. We claimed and provided evidence that the DPP was in charge. An election took place. Within weeks after the election, a new controller of customs is brought in. And within 2 weeks, he takes advice from the Attorney General. And the Attorney General was whom? Was Ernest's lawyer. And the Attorney General had no role in this matter to withdraw the case. And he connected a series of dots, so much so that the Court of Appeal gave us permission to go to the CCJ, right? And for that evidence to be presented, and for the CCJ, and that's what I'm saying to you, read the decision. And there are inconsistencies with the decision. And more importantly, even without those inconsistencies, why don't we want to know the truth? What was it that would have prevented this case from being adjudicated? Because there are some real technical details here that matter. Can you remain the beneficial owner of a car, meaning pay for the car, and transfer the car into the name of the state and get back the car without showing where you got the permission to do that? And that's why I said to you, well, let's be facetious and let's be sarcastic. Yes, because that's the new way now, right? If that is possible, then why can't all St. Lucians benefit? Why can't you go to the High Commission in London and say, can you put the car in your name, so I can get the car duty-free, save 12.5%, right? Transfer the car down and I'll pick up the car here and show customs that it's my car. If in fact getting permission is possible. It's not possible, Tim, to get permission to do that. And I'll tell you why it's not impossible. It's impossible. Because the agreement that we have with Britain or America and everybody else, the diplomatic agreement, does not allow that kind of transaction. Can't be that the state is going to lie for somebody. Because in essence, that would be doing. The state would be saying the car belongs to me. But we know that Ernest was the beneficial owner. And why am I persisting this? Because I speak to some people and say, oh no, stop it. Stop it. Why? Because it seems that the population wants the proof that he's dishonest. And honesty, and honesty,
But
and
should it be clear that we're not calling anybody dishonest?
I didn't say that.
Yeah.
I said the people want to know, right, whether he's honest. And if in fact that I am correct, which I do believe I am correct, okay, it is a behavior and a pattern of behavior that we have continued to see. And that is worrisome. So even today, after all the things that he's been through, is there any irony? Is there any surprise that when this deal with Arsenal comes up, that there's no details? That we're just being sold a story?
Yeah, but should we blame him, or should we look to the Prime Minister, who is also the Minister with responsibility for finance, to address issues of that nature?
And
he should be accounting to the people.
And the senior Minister of Governance in this country is the Prime Minister. And when he was elected the first time and even the second time, he was elected on that platform. He said he's not going to allow any kind of corruption to be taking place in his cabinet.
Not making a revelation to the St. Lucian public regarding the nitty-gritty of that particular deal does not amount to corruption. We have to make this clear. We just want clarification on it and a revelation and explanation as to what's the nature of that deal.
But by not revealing the details of the deal allows people to speculate.
Yeah.
Okay, and particularly when we've seen a particular pattern of behavior, GPH and CIP. I mean, I was going to bring up the whole thing with CIP. Who's read it? So you're talking about when I applied for the court case, I applied for an injunction, right? A year and a half has gone by, Tim. Is it a year and a half? Is it a year and a half? More than a year and a half has gone by since I put in the application for the case. 6 weeks after I put in the application for the injunction, the government came out and said, we've suspended the program and we've terminated the contract. We've not seen any evidence, only a cabinet conclusion. 1 month before the elections, see how it matters, the judge comes out and says, denied. Why? Because they accept that the cabinet conclusion is binding. Okay. Well, I'm going to accept that as well. So the court now has basically said the cabinet conclusion that the state passed is binding, because cabinet conclusions can change at the next cabinet meeting. But they're saying that this one is binding. And we now know that there is a, what do you call it, not an arbitrator, a regulator that's being appointed, right? The point I'm trying to make, did the judge act in the interest of the people? The judge said, me bringing in information from St. Kitts, Galaxy, and the same agent from Dubai, who participated in discounting scheme, which was proven. It's not speculation anymore. 150 files were produced, and persons admitted that they didn't pay the right amount of money. Do you know that? Yeah. That's a fact. Okay. So those are the same actors, and what we were able to show is the mechanism as to how that was done, and showed that it was done in St. Lucia. And the judge says, I have not provided sufficient evidence. Okay. So as a leader of the opposition, or you as a journalist, if in fact we're not getting the audited reports, and if in fact the audit of the escrow account is not being provided, how ultimately am I going to provide the evidence? And is that the purpose of a judicial review? Or is the judicial review supposed to be enough evidence to say that there may be something wrong, and therefore it requires a further examination? Now, I'm for sure, that a lot of persons in St. Lucia have grown fed up and weary and exhausted of all this back and forth. But I want to say to you, it is those things that I've been doing, which is what an opposition is supposed to do, is to try to hold the government accountable. And ultimately, at the end of the day, going to the court ought to be where you can get resolution. But if I have participated in that court process, and I've been left scratching my head, right? That here is, I thought that we would want to get to the bottom of this. Let's put this to rest. And if it was an administrative error, let's get it resolved. The situation with Joy and wanting to know what happened. Because here's a young lady that did everything right, including a court restraining order. And that the initial magistrate kept him in jail, denied him bond, and weeks later, a judge decided to free him. There needs to be an examination.
More on that in just a moment. And of course, we'll be taking your calls as well. We're due for a break. You're watching NewsMaker Live right here on DBS Television. We are also on Facebook. My guest this evening, the leader of the parliamentary opposition and former Prime Minister, Alan Chastanet. Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. You're watching NewsMaker Live right here on DBS Television. Later, we'll be taking your calls, so please stand by. My guest this evening is the leader of the opposition. We continue to say that the system failed Joy St. Omer. But this is not the first time the system has failed a woman or a child or some individual in St. Lucia in such an egregious manner. Under previous administrations, and including this current administration, what does that say about governance in St. Lucia and ensuring that the mistakes of one administration is not repeated by another, so that it does not become something that's seen as normal?
I think I called you, I think it was last week,
Yeah.
and we had that exact same discussion. And unfortunately, I'm not looking to pass the blame, because while we were off the air, you and I had a very short discussion, and I informed you that the state has never provided any resources for me as a leader of the opposition to take any of these cases to court. I've paid for them.
Yeah.
There's no financial benefit to me if I am to win a judicial review case. So not like a civil case, or, there's no compensation. It's simply to get the courts to be able to opine on a matter. And that to me is extremely important in understanding in this things. And in order to be able to get an independent perspective on the facts, right? Having a court case to me was very important. And that's why I'm saying to you, I feel the courts ought to have allowed the case to proceed. This helps now answer the case, the question you're asking with Joy. It has happened before. So if you have a government in office that says they care about the people, they're going to put people first. That's, I believe, is the slogan, right? When the young lady, and I apologize, I forget her name, about 2 years ago, from Grand Riviere, that was the next day she was going to be going to court to testify against people who raped her, right? And she was shot on her way back home. Pretty horrific. Don't you think that in itself ought to have caused a review to take place? And if in fact that we all had played our role in insisting that there be a review, maybe Joy would be alive today. Because where the system failed her, those corrections would have made change. We talk about the American system. One of the things about the American system is the ability to sue, and the quantum of relief that people are being given, yes, and the frequency and the ease in which people can sue to hold people accountable, yes. I think I'm not wanting to bring the American system here, but I think that we need to understand that unless there's accountability and that people know that their work is going to be reviewed, so permanent secretaries, senior technical officers, judges, who's reviewing their work? Imagine when I wrote to the Chief Justice, say, how is it that the judge was removed? And what's going to happen with the investigation of his claims that there was, and she said that's not her responsibility. Well, if it's not her whose responsibility it is? Until we figure that out, and that we're insisting that people's work are reviewed and processes are reviewed, and there's some level of accountability, I'm not sure that there's going to be a change. And we've really reached a tipping point in St. Lucia, and other countries have reached the same tipping point. So I don't want to say that we're unique in St. Lucia, okay? But society has to determine whether, in fact, our democracy is worth saving. And if there needs to be amendments to the Constitution because it doesn't really, in not keeping with our culture or whatever those changes are going to be. But society cannot just blindly accept that government is good. All those persons who blindly accepted that Bernie Madoff, because he went to the right schools, hung around with the right circles, and because the SEC didn't clamp down on him, right, that he was okay, and deferred to that truth, notwithstanding all the bells and whistles that were taking place, that there's something wrong. Yes? And one person proved that if you just sat down and did an evaluation, in less than a day was able to determine that it was a Ponzi scheme. The example of the guy who was the physical therapist for the team. The mother thinking, wow, this must be so tough for him, that he's doing the right thing. They deferred to the trusting of him. And I want to say to St. Lucia, I'm going to look right in the camera. There's enough things that have happened in recent times that I don't believe that we can give this government the benefit of the doubt anymore. And I don't want to make any false allegations, but I believe that if we are forcing the government to provide the details that we've been denied so that you can make up your mind for yourself. I'm saying to you, I feel the courts have failed us. And as a leader of the opposition, that is where I have had to go. And when the court has failed me, it's failed you. But the truth matters. And integrity in government matters. So when this government made allegations that there was corruption in my party, and 6 years has gone by, no evidence of that corruption. You're in office. You control everything. How is it you've not been able to prove that? You really believe not providing the details of the GPH deal is good governance? Not providing the details of the CIP? I want to ask you a question. You're a journalist. In the last 3 years, how many passports, how many new citizens has the CIP unit approved?
Well, I don't have that information at my disposal because it has not been revealed.
And is that right? Is that right?
You're reversing the rules on being there?
I am. I mean, I'm being facetious, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm being a devil's advocate. And then to say, okay, well, what do we have it to compare with? Hey, because we love making that statement. Well, what did you do? Okay, well, we had the report on time, and the report not only included the number of new citizens, it included their names. So the precedence was established, and the law requires that. So 5 years has gone by, and this government not once has done that, not on time, and not provided the names, not even provided the numbers. So let's say, well, we don't want to provide the names, but at least provide the numbers. How is it that we're still guessing? How is that? So again, leader of the opposition, the Prime Minister revealed in his budget speech that close to $250 million was transferred from CIP funds to government. Almost $100 million to the consolidated account, and another $150 million into unnamed entities. All we heard was the money went to health, the money went to water, the money went to social development, and the money went to infrastructure. None of us know. Did that money come directly from the CIP to statutory bodies? Did the money go into the economic fund and applications were made by different entities within government for those monies? We don't know. And why was that important? Because it is suspected that $110 million went into the SSDF. And I can only tell you, it's a fact, that during the election, there was an inordinate amount of food vouchers, building materials, and contracts that are being dispersed. And what was the governance structure behind the SSDF on the disbursements of those resources? I've written to the Director of Finance. It's been now 3 weeks. Not even an acknowledgement. The Prime Minister acknowledged it, because I copied the Prime Minister. So in all fairness to the Prime Minister, he acknowledged it. The Director of Finance has not acknowledged it. I've gotten no response. I'm going to rewrite the Director of Finance again this week. And if within the next 2 weeks the Director of Finance does not respond, I will make my letters public. And I want to say to the Director of Finance, it's so important, sir, that you respond, because there is very clear evidence that during the elections you were part of the campaign team with Ernest Hilaire.
What evidence is that?
Photographs.
Okay.
Of him in a red shirt out canvassing with Ernest.
I mean, guilty by association?
Well,
I mean, if you're walking in the company of somebody.
If you're taking a group photo deliberately in a red shirt with a minister, when you're wearing a red shirt and you're out canvassing, you're not in your government hat, you're in your political hat. But it's for him to explain that. Okay? But it begs the question. I'm also finding out that the Director of Finance was the chairman of the Darren Sammy renovation project. A project that we have zero information. Do you even know how much money went into it? We know that the NLA initially borrowed, was it $80 million and $90 million, right? And then we heard that another $30 million was borrowed to do the Olympic pool. What have you heard about the Olympic pool? Nothing? And the Director of Finance was responsible? The Director of Finance is the chairman of the Economic Fund. An economic fund that is supposed to be audited on an annual basis, and there's been no audits. Is that the right example? And I'm just saying to you, positions like the Director of Finance, positions like the DPP, positions like permanent secretaries, okay, required to be independent and transparent and accountable to the people of this country. And if we don't change our attitude and demand that and recognize that that's not about politics, but that's about good governance. It's about determining the integrity of the people that are making the decisions for us, the integrity of the people who are supposed to be overseeing the governance and the use of our funds, and the implementation and the enforcement of laws in this country. We must trust them. And part of their responsibility has to be maintaining that confidence and that trust of the public. That is why some people have to resign positions, because what? They've lost the trust of the public.
Mr. Producer, we have the telephone number online. Let's ensure that I could hear the calls, and then we'll go ahead with our calls, and so that people can call in with your questions and your contributions. For my guest once again, who is the leader of the opposition, Mr. Alan Chastanet. You plan to attend the funeral service of the deceased Joy St. Thomas?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I absolutely intend to get involved now with the recommendation that Sarah Flood had made, which there has to be an independent investigation. You'd have thought, with the explanation that she initially gave, I think, on your show, Tim, that's what, 2 weeks ago, maybe a bit more?
About that,
right?
About 3 weeks.
How clear was that? I mean, I even heard you comment, and you said, wow, this is non-political, this makes sense, and I think that even in terms of how she explained it, and that this wasn't a witch hunt, right?
I think we have a call. Good evening to you, NewsMaker Live, you're on the air.
Good evening, Tim, and good evening to the leader of the opposition.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
Leader of the opposition, I want to take this opportunity publicly to applaud you for your advocacy. I would say, without any fear or favor, this is the most corrupt government.
If we don't have the evidence, if we don't have the evidence, don't accuse any government of being corrupt, sir, okay?
Okay, but Tim, let me say this. It's the responsibility of any government to be accountable and to be transparent with its population, with its citizens. And what we've seen with this current SLP government, they are not transparent and they are not accountable. Let me tell you, Tim, how in heaven's name can a government sign a GPH deal or an agreement with a foreign company, sold our ports, and we do not know the contents of that agreement? Is that fair, Tim? How it is that a government can borrow from the NLA $80 million to refurbishing the Darren Sammy cricket ground, and we have not seen, we do not know who's the contractor? How it is that a government can give a contract to build custody suites, and we do not know who is the contractor? We're just hearing certain names banded around. How it is that a government can give away our ports for a dollar, and we do not know the content of the agreement? It's unacceptable. And I'm just saying to St. Lucians, open your eyes and realize what's happening.
Okay, caller. Thank you so much for your contribution. We're taking some more of your calls once again for my guest. We are waiting another call. We have the call. Good evening, NewsMaker Live, you're on the air.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
Yes, I'd just like to ask Mr. Chastanet, after hearing him lament so much egregious stuff that has happened, if he were to assume the role of Prime Minister once again, what would you do to make fundamental changes to things like appointment of permanent secretaries and all these kinds of heads of boards and all these things? Because for me, I have a serious problem with all these things being handled by politicians, because it means who is guarding the God. Because at the end of the day, if the politician has too much power, they make the law, they break the law. So what are we going to do to take that power away from the politicians so that people could get into jobs based on qualification and the integrity of the position? I'd like to hear from the leader of the opposition. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much for calling.
I think, first of all, there has to be a continuance. So whatever you're going to do, there has to be a consistency in whatever you're going to do. But the Public Service Commission needs reform. I think the caller is 100% right. I am pretty sure that Cabinet should not be the persons appointing the persons of the Public Service Commission. And maybe we have to go the way of getting people elected to some of those positions. Okay? The Public Information Act, we promised that if we'd won, that we would have implemented. If we were back in office immediately, I don't think, whether it's I'm the leader, because that's not what we're discussing here tonight. We're saying as a party, I can say categorically the party embraces the idea that if we were to get back into office, United Workers' Party, that we would immediately approve a public
Freedom of
Information Act. Okay. And I want to say, Tim, we start understanding the culture of our country and the discussion I was having today. Government is 60% of the economy, right? Media houses are now dependent on government. I don't think that government should be in a position to pick and choose which media houses they want. So whether we're going to give media houses an advertising budget based on their listenership, whatever, but the discretion as to which stations and which mediums we're going to be using as a government ought not to be allowed, because the economy is too small and government can use that as an influence. All the things that we are showing that there's some discretion, and the caller was 100% correct. We must take those tough decisions. We must start understanding the governance and the integrity of the government is as equally as important as it is in fighting crime, in education, healthcare, and infrastructure. It is just as important. The issue of cabinet and parliament, it's not working. The system was designed expecting that when a bill comes to parliament, there would be a fair and objective debate, because each parliamentarian does not represent a political party. You represent your constituency, the people who voted for you and the people who didn't vote for you. And you're supposed to be debating a bill and ensuring that the contents of the bill, the legal part particularly, right, is not discriminatory against the people in your constituency. And you're supposed to bring it down to the layman as to how this law is. I think that Rick says it all the time. If in fact the basic person, whatever interpretation they're going to have, that's what the interpretation should be. It should not be some complicated calculus formula as to interpret what the law is. So I want to say there has to be greater separation between governance and, more importantly, the reason why I'm saying the Public Service Commission, if I want to complain about a permanent secretary, in the current system, it could be fabricated. So if I'm in government and I want to get rid of a permanent secretary, I can get somebody to forward a complaint and use that as a reason to move the person. That should not be allowed. We should be confident. The state, the people, have to be confident in the independence and the discretion that civil servants and key people are using. And if they don't do it, Tim, they must be fired. There must be accountability.
We have a call. Good evening. Thanks for holding on. You're on the air.
Good evening, Tim.
Good evening to you, caller.
Good evening, sir.
I have 2 questions. I'll make it quick. Mr. Chastanet, I called a while ago saying that the government of the Labour Party sold a pot, and you said nothing. If I go according to Hansard, when you were making the accusation in the House, and you said that the government sold a pot, then they bring out certain documents and when they said that, you said, I never said you sold. I never said the pot was sold. It's in Hansard. You said, I never said the pot was sold.
Okay, caller, that's easy. The pot was leased.
No, it was lift.
Yeah.
I'm talking about sold. There's a difference between selling it and listing. That's a difference. Okay? And secondly, Mr. Martinez and you confirm that with the CIP monies from whatever company it was, all the CIP money, because they couldn't open a bank account in Lucia. You're operating in Panama, so all the CIP money went to Panama. So that money, that CIP money in Panama, was it ever accounted for? Because apparently it's not going to the consolidated fund, it went to Panama. So where is that money?
Okay, caller. All right.
So the money never went to Panama. I think that there were persons who saw the escrow account, which was in Hong Kong, and it was called Panjoma or whatever it was, and people assumed it was Panama. It's not. There was, in the CIP, there is an escrow account. The purpose of the escrow account is because the real estate entity is selling shares in their business. The government must hold the developer accountable. That's why the money goes into the escrow account. So to make sure that there is a balance between the construction of the hotel and the drawdown of the monies, and to make sure that the monies that are going into the escrow account are accounted for. That's why it's required an audit. When I was in government and the escrow account was set up, very little money had been put in the escrow account, okay, and we had already lost the election by the time the audit was due. This government, over the years, when the real sales are taking place, because 6,000 applications, according to the government, have been approved at $200,000 an application. So that's 1.2 billion US dollars is supposed to be in the escrow account to be able to build the hotel. All we've been asking for is, hey, give us an audit. Who's reconciling the account? But what did the minister say? So it's not the government's money.
You have a call. Good evening, NewsMaker Live, you're on the air.
Good evening, Tim.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
Opposition leader.
Sir.
Sir, first things first. The last election that was lost, on what basis you think we lost it? Or what was the issues at hand that determined the election result?
You tell me.
No, I'm asking, as you were being the political leader, what do you think were the issues?
I think there were a multitude, and that's why I'm saying is currently right now, the party is undertaking a review and an audit of a lot of different things in order for us to be able to come to some kind of conclusion as to what that was. But I'm going to say to you, not the only factor, but a contributing factor is now the discovery that so much money was put into government agencies and spent during the elections.
Was the other point, caller?
Okay, let me tell you, give you my take on that.
That's why I asked you from there, because you clearly have an opinion about it.
Let me give you my take on it.
Okay.
The last election campaign was not. The result came not about issues, because there was enough issues to discuss. Would you agree with me that we lost the election because of leadership?
You're speaking to me specifically? My leadership?
Yes.
And I won Miku South, and the reason for that is?
It's not a matter of you winning Miku South. We lost all the other seats.
Right.
Don't you think it would have been more profitable if we had lost Miku South and won the other seats? Wouldn't we be in government?
Sure, but we didn't.
Right.
So, but you're asking me whether you're asking me. Wait a second, sir.
Hold on.
You're suggesting to me, and look, I want to say to you, because I don't want to make any denials. Okay, an election is in a large part about leadership. So I'm not going to run away from that or refute that, but it's not an absolute number. And it's not an absolute. So you're saying we lost because of me and anybody else?
We lost the election because of leadership. That was the main issue.
Who? You're saying it plurally. Is it the leader or leadership?
Leadership. We lost it because of the leadership. Who was the leader?
Okay.
Because let me tell you something. The election was about leadership. It wasn't about issues, because there was enough issues to go on. We lost the election because of leadership. So another question to you: do you have intentions of still contesting the leadership of the party?
So that's not a decision for me to make. That's a decision for the party to make. And as I said to you, the party is currently undertaken a review, and the decision of the leadership of the party, of the United Workers' Party, has always been determined at a convention. And whatever is in the best interest of the party, me, Alan Chastanet, I'm speaking for myself, because you've spoken about leadership, I assume it's plural, meaning that there's more people you're talking about. But me, Alan Chastanet, my intention is to do whatever it takes to make sure the United Workers' Party can form the next government. Whether I'm part or not part of that, that's to be determined by the party. And exactly the statement you're making will be evaluated. And if in fact what you're saying is correct, that I have to bear the responsibility of the loss of the election, then I will be replaced. And I will have zero difficulty, and I can make one more promise. And if I am replaced, you're not going to see me on the platform of the Labour Party. You will see me supporting whoever replaces me, because I believe in the ideology of United Workers' Party. And I believe that there are a collective group of people in the United Workers' Party that are great representatives. And if in fact the messenger has to be changed in order for the message to get through, that's the easiest decision to make.
All right, caller. Thank you so much for calling. Let's continue with your calls. Once again, this is NewsMaker Live on DBS Television with my guest, Mr. Alan Chastanet. Don't want to pose another question to you and then interrupted by a call. So let's see if we have another contribution to put on the air. Hello? Hello?
Hello, good night.
Good evening to you, caller.
Yes, I would like to make a contribution, please.
You are on the air. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. What I want to say, sometimes some of us Lucians not pay attention close enough to what's going on in our country. And a lot of us like turn a blind eye and like a little fast money too much in that election that passed there. You know the amount of people that get $5,000 and the devoted followers get a lot more? Can $5,000 build a house for somebody? Because that's the kind of promise they give them. $5,000 to build a house. Can $5,000 build a house, a home for somebody? A little poor man. He's not even building the little hut that they build in Denry. Tell us for anything else. And that's what a lot of us take from these fellas, and they refuse to accept what is right and wrong. Too much people turn a blind eye to what's going on in the country, and they're not taking responsibility to see what it is to do the right thing. That's my contribution.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for sharing with us. But we have no proof of people receiving any $5 payments, $500,000 payments to vote in the past.
You say that, but I want to say there's also no proof that it didn't happen. Okay? And the fact is, the questions and the issues that have been raised that would suggest that that's what's happened, the government has a responsibility to clarify. But if we're not trusting the institutions that have been put in charge to regulate these things, Tim, we're in trouble.
We have a call. Good evening, NewsMaker Live, you're on the air.
Yes, good evening, Tim.
Hi, good evening to you, caller.
Yes, Timothy, I honestly believe that in the last general elections, it is something that we need to reflect on and understand that St. Lucia belongs to us. And unless we do not make tough decisions and understand that who or what party to support and the policies, like I could say that some people in the country did not believe in the health care insurance. No, some people gave the benefit of the doubt, but majority didn't buy into it. Okay? Now, what I'm saying, if we give a chance and prove Alan's administration on the wrong side, then he has to pay for it. But we in this country, we see too much red and yellow and do not exercise the right sides or rather policies or support policies of a party to see how far we could reach as a St. Lucia. And if we don't do that, we're going to fail. Like the Honorable Prime Minister going to say that I am, or refer to him as a boss. You understand? I mean, you have won the elections. Alan Chastanet has realized that he's the leader of the opposition. He is trying to reach out to the government in many different ways in terms of transparency. He spoke about the GPH and the list goes on. Look, now the Arsenal thing is coming out. He's not sure, or the people of St. Lucia, by extension, is not sure about what amount of money or what is the contractual agreement that is there. It is for us to now look at ourselves in a very big mirror and ask ourselves those questions as to what is going on in this country, whether this country is for sale, and to understand and let the St. Lucia Labour Party or the United Workers' Party know that we are the ones in charge and not they are the ones in charge. So I am saying, the previous caller who said that leadership was the problem, maybe it is true, but if he continues to just point fingers at Alan, I believe he is part of the United Workers' Party because he kept saying we. I believe he should have a right, even before the elections, to point out the deficiencies and the problems that he saw, and not after elections. And I think sometimes we St. Lucians are too biased and too low-minded. That is why we will be bought. And today I will conclude by saying, today it's a shame to see St. Lucia politics go down the drain as the highest bidder wins. So I will be one that will support the policies, the principles, and the transparency of Alan Chastanet's regime and his qualities that is vested in this man. I believe this man means a lot to St. Lucia. I thank you.
All right, caller. Thank you so much. Let's see if we get a final call, and then Mr. Chastanet will have the final word as we're getting all set to conclude the broadcast. Good evening, NewsMaker Live, you're on the air. Hello. Good evening to you. Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening to you, caller.
Good evening.
All right, caller. In the background, there's a noise as always. Please, when you call, turn down the volume of your device before you can go ahead with your contribution. So if we have a final call, we'll go to that call. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, good evening to you.
Mr. Chastanet, I heard you were talking about the convention will determine who leads the party, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about the delegates will make that choice.
Correct.
Okay. We all know about the manipulation that is being done among delegates. We all know about it.
What's the manipulation that's being done?
Parliamentary reps, or how they call it, candidates telling you who to vote for when you go to the convention, who to vote for, who not to vote for. It happens.
I'm not sure that you've been to one of our conventions. That doesn't happen there.
What?
Okay. Each of the constituency groups make their determination.
Let me tell you.
And made of members of the party.
Wait
a second. Are you suggesting, because I'm listening to you, because I've heard the Labour Party make that allegation that I bought the leadership of the United Workers' Party, notwithstanding.
Hold on.
Good.
I am telling you that meetings are called before the convention, and candidates tell delegates who to vote for and who not to vote for. Okay?
Okay.
Number one. Number two, would you agree that the last two elections was between the two leaders? Between Philip J. It was not between SLP and UWP. It was between Philip J. and Alan Chastanet. That is why we got this bad. We even lost Mikud not which was our backbone. We lost it back-to-back elections, you know. And that's a shame. That's a crying shame. We could not work for what Labrie is to SLP. You see anywhere down the road we will win that Labrie seat?
You can never tell. The Labour Party never saw them winning Miku. But I'm just going to ask you the question. Because you seem like you're pretty astute, and that are you a numbers man or you're an emotional man?
Chief.
No, I'm just asking.
I am a UWP I had bred UWP,
okay.
And I am telling you.
So let me ask you a question.
So
let me ask you a question. In the case of Miku North, because that's what you're referring to, do you believe it was in 2021 that the problems that we had in Miku North revealed themselves? Or do you think that there was a problem brewing in Miku North for a very long time?
You know why? One of the reasons why we lost Miku North?
Tell me.
You know why?
Tell me.
Because Lady Janice Coleman came and she endorsed Jerry.
Okay, so
that is one of the reasons why we lost Miku North.
That was in the election in 2021. Okay, so I want to say to you, because I don't want to really get into detail in discussing the party stuff, but I would suggest to you that in general, 100% correct. And I'm not here tonight, sir, as a UWP supporter. I'm not here to defend myself or to promote myself as the next leader. And that's why I'm saying to you, that we will put ourselves in a room, and whether it is through the process that you've spoken about, that we will choose who we think the best leader is. For my part, I'm not going to be here to advocate for me to be the leader. That's not what I'm here. I'm right here as the leader of the opposition, dealing with the governance within our own country. The leadership of the party will be determined in convention. I assure you, for me, I want United Workers' Party to win. It's not at any cost, meaning me staying as the political leader is not my objective. I don't need it. I'm scared to say that sometimes because people misinterpret that. I don't have an ambition in my life to be the political leader or to be the prime minister. I took up the mantle at the time because nobody else wanted to take up the mantle in 2013. I've maintained that if the party, the majority of the people in the party at any time feel that I should be replaced, I'm happy to do so. I'm not here to defend myself as the leader, to promote myself as the next leader, and I will not take away in any way the responsibility of the party that has to make those decisions. And again, people in the party who are very astute politically
thank you so much. Thank you.
Can make that determination. Yeah. Okay? And I think I don't want to convolute the two issues, and it's difficult enough. I don't want to use the platform or to be seen that I'm using the platform as a leader of the opposition to campaign with my party. My party knows who I am. They know what I represent. Okay? And there's sometimes the messenger needs to be changed because the message is not getting through. I don't want to be in the way of progress of this country. Okay? It can't be making sacrifices and doing all of these things simply to maintain myself as the political leader. There are multiple of ways that I can participate in supporting my party. But I give everybody the assurance, if in fact the decision is made, and I'll reveal something. There are persons who feel that I ought to make a pronouncement before the convention that I'm not going to run. I have watched enough political leaders make emotional decisions or spontaneous decisions and come back to regret it. Okay? I want maturity, and I believe that maturity exists in our party, that the leaders of the party will collectively meet and make the determination what role Alan Chastanet should play. And I embrace that. Right now, Tim, there's a bigger issue. And I assume that you're going to give me an opportunity to wrap up. Can I use that opportunity?
Yeah, go ahead.
What's concerning to me in St. Lucia is sometimes we're saying that I cannot feel something, and therefore nothing is wrong. And our financial literacy is weak because there are significant amount of signals to say to us that something is wrong, right? We've made a big deal. Prior to COVID, the debt to GDP in the country was 59-60%. In 2020, because of the contraction of the economy, so the debt to GDP is debt and GDP. GDP contracted by 24%. Therefore, the ratio went up to 91%. But initially, I'm not going to overreact because I knew that the GDP contracted not because of policy, it contracted because of COVID, and the world has shut down. By 2023, the economy, based on the decision to open up the economy for tourism and to focus on construction. I mean, I listen to some people. How could it not be logical that when schools were closed and businesses were closed, that was not the best time to fix roads? Isn't that the best time? Okay? And more importantly, we realized that when people were involved in construction, they were not getting infected with COVID. There was significant separation, whether it's the sun, whatever it was, but people were not getting affected. We also saw a massive opportunity to influence international organizations who were insisting that when they gave us monies, that we open up the bids internationally. And we said to them, hey, COVID, can we break down the project to smaller sizes so that we can make sure that the local firms are going to, not to eliminate the bidding process, but to change it so that we make the sizes smaller so that more of the local construction companies would qualify. The drains were brought down to smaller amounts so that the money spread throughout the community. Okay? So projects that had been dragging, we used the opportunity to fast track them during COVID. The decision to open up for tourism, we can now have the benefit of hindsight. Were we right? Was it a good thing? The only economy, two economies in CARICOM grew by double digits in 2021 and 2022. St. Lucia and Guyana. Guyana because of the discovery of oil, the recent discovery of oil. St. Lucia grew by 12% and 18%. I always lament the fact to ask myself the question, if they had not stopped St. Jude's, if they had not stopped HIA Airport, if they had not stopped Shock, if they had not stopped Tavern, if they had not stopped the other highways, and if they had continued with the DSH and Cabot and the building of the cruise ship port in Vieux Fort, that 18% could have potentially been even higher. Notwithstanding that, the debt to GDP going into COVID was 60%. We had COVID, we had to borrow money to be able to keep the country going. And by 2023, the debt to GDP of St. Lucia was 70%. So we can actually say that the impact of COVID cost us 10% debt to GDP. Okay? Between 2023 and today, do you know what the debt to GDP in St. Lucia is? 85%. That between 2023 and today, this government has borrowed over $1.6 billion. Well, not borrowed, has added $1.6 billion of new debt. I asked the question to the public. Where are we seeing that? Where are we seeing the results of that? And so the pain is showing itself, and there is some pain in the cost of living and the quality of life of people, but not to the extent of the mismanagement of the economy as yet. As yet. So what was the first signal to me that something is wrong? Here's you have a government that says they put people first. The Iran conflict breaks out. Immediately, prices of oil went up. And there were predictions that the price of gas was going to make it to what? $150, $200 a gallon, a barrel. Remember that? Okay? The world is going to fall apart, blah, 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 blah. Okay? 2 weeks later, Trump comes out and says, oh, peace is at hand. The stock market comes back up, the price of oil drops. And for the next month, the price of oil fluctuated between $85 and $80 a barrel. But it never made it to 100. The government took the decision to go ahead and increase the price of gas. It allowed Lucia to impose or increase the surcharge. Instead of taking a little bit less money, not no money, Tim, not no money, a little bit less, and using some of the money to have paid the surcharge at Lucia, or at least paid the surcharge for the more vulnerable people. To say, okay, we're going to pay Lucia money, and persons who have a certain income level, because SSDF is supposed to have those numbers, we will pay the surcharge for them. Okay? But when the government didn't do that, and instead the government allowed the prices to go up and did not interfere with the surcharge, as a business person, that signals to me there's something wrong. Is it that the government couldn't afford to do it? And is in fact that the financial situation in the government may be a lot worse than what we think it is? I know, I passed by and I saw the halls of justice today. When it's completed, it's going to increase the rent that we pay by $30 million a year. Nobody has told us how much money it's going to cost to operate those courthouses. Think of that big building, air conditioned, the number of staff that you're going to have to put in it, okay? We now know at St. Jude's that the construction has been in excess of $350 million. But the cost of running the stadium was $18 million a year. The projections now is that it's going to cost in excess of $80 million a year. $60 million increase a year. So what did we see since 2023? Not only have we seen a substantial increase in the amount of debt, the debt to GDP is 85%, but we're now seeing where the cost of running government is higher than the revenue they're generating. And there's this gap. And I want solutions to understand what that means for them. It means that the amount of money that government has for education, the amount of money that they have for healthcare, the amount of money they have for national security, the amount of money they have to maintain roads or to build more facilities is going to be reduced. The amount of support that they can give to people is going to be reduced. And let us, like some of the callers called, not be fooled by the fact that there was a windfall of revenue. The money from CIP, $250 million, Tim, was taken and injected into government. The government added $320 million of new debt. So you're talking close to $600 million of money was injected last year into the economy of St. Lucia. And yet the economy contracted by 0.5%. Retail and wholesale sales were down by 3%. Something is wrong. Something is seriously wrong. All of this, and I want to agree with one of the callers, is a wake-up call for solutions. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm not asking you to believe the United Workers' Party. I'm asking you to simply to put on your critical hat and ask questions and stop taking for granted that the government is telling you the truth, because the evidence suggests otherwise. You cannot defer to their truth. And I'm sorry that more evidence has not come out for the public through the courts or even through the media to have held the government accountable. But that does not excuse us individually from asking the relevant questions. Very pertinent questions. And I would just say to you, in my life, when people are hemming and bobbing and not wanting to give you the correct answers to something, generally it means that they're hiding something. And if we don't take on our responsibility to start demanding greater accountability, not only of the politicians, but of the persons that have been put in charge to hold the politicians accountable, then it's Klopwo that's going to smoke our own pipe.
Thank you so much, sir, for being my guest on this evening's NewsMaker Live. Thank you, as always, for watching and listening to the broadcast and contributing via your calls. If it's Wednesday, it's NewsMaker Live. Time now for the clip that beat. Once again, thank you so much for watching. My name is Timothy Poleon. Good night and see you next time.
I, Philip Joseph here.
I would like to be judged as being the Prime Minister, not being judged as being part of a government.
Came into government that we had a manifesto and a vision and mission that had been approved by my party, by the highest body.
Basel 11 has not been in existence. 50 was...
Giant getting bazooka. You spraying big on to knock out mosquitoes.
I have never had a joint account with anybody in my life. Not my ex-wife, not my children, nobody. And I will refer that to the Privileges Committee.
What about the culture of people getting into office and not being effective in taking
What people become Prime Minister of Lucia have been the most ready.
Let's do it this Wednesday, because if it's Wednesday, it's NewsMaker Live.